Hello and welcome to episode 47, part 3, the final installment of our Saturday night live special. Now, Gar, I got to tell you, this has been a truckload of fun for me, a little more fun than what I thought it was originally going to be. How about you?
Just like always when, doing the preparations for the show, it really becomes kind of fun because you kind of, rediscover some gold that needs to have the dust blown off of it.
Sure does. And like I said, today we're talking about the musical guest. Now, before we get into kind of my list, what are some lists or some of the musical performances you came across?
Well, of course, because I'm of an older generation, I wanted to kind of, pick out some really good performances from the earlier years, but
sure.
There really isn't a whole lot that can be that I could dig up. Of a decent quality because technology wasn't what it is today back then, and so the only thing that we have to be able to see nowadays are old technology versions that have became degraded and faded by the time it's been digitized, so we can see it today. So it was kind of a little bit of a disappointment in that, because I wanted to be able to capture some of the older performances that were going on back then, because in the earlier years they were big stars.
Sure,
or people that had just exploded at that time, huge explosions. So then all of a sudden, immediately they make it on Saturday Night Live. So, a lot of those performers that were performing in the earlier years, if they were stars that just exploded at that time, you would be able to capture them at the time when they were performing, when they were really hungry.
Yes.
And always, when you capture those performances, when these great musical performers were really young and hungry, you really, really capture them at their best.
Oh, yeah. And this is what I would say was the equivalent of when MTV was first launching. It used to be a major thing to be a band or a musical performer and be the musical guest on Saturday Night Live. First of all, that's how a lot of people would premiere their act, or it used to, and then once it was decided who the musical guest was going to be, a very important part of that was what song are they going to play. A lot of times, some of the performers I'm going to be talking about today, they would go on and they would if they had a new music video out, they would play the latest single off of the album at the time, or what the big MTV hit was. And of course, being a show that dates all the way back to 1975, there were musical performances on before MTV was even a thing or even a thought. One of the earliest performances I was able to come across was a performance from 1977 of Chuck Berry performing his classic signature song, Johnny Be Good.
And I'm really glad, because you sent that to me, and I watched it, and of course, it was kind of hard to watch because it had, that whole thing, that was almost,
like covering
it made it hard to actually view it.
Yeah.
But I just really didn't care, because it really captured him at a time when he was late in his career.
Sure.
And at that time, it was actually a resurgence of his popularity. Because at that time, he had taken a dip in popularity, and a lot of the shows that he was doing, it was at much smaller venues, and it was kind of questionable whether he was just going to fade in the sunset. But then all of a sudden, rock bands in the 70s, like hard rock bands, it became a staple to play Johnny B. Good, because Johnny B. Good was, still, it still rocked, and it lent itself to the nostalgic, but transferred well to the hard rock bands that were playing in the 70s at that time. So because of that, it became a staple. It became a resurgence of his career, and he started playing, big venues, and then he became
big again.
Back on Saturday Night Live. So there's a whole backstory to that performance.
And again,
and it really captured him. He really still had it, and his performance was fan-freaking-tastic. And when you see the moves that he does on the stage, those moves have been stolen by so many lead singers of other bands that people watch even today and think that is a move that was developed by the actual person that's doing it. No, people have stolen those moves. I don't mean that in a bad way. They're actually paying homage to him, and they use those moves even today. I do.
Sure. And Gar,
I do.
And Gar, people don't realize that, Chuck Berry was a real rock and roll icon at one. He was a legendary musician, and like you said, at that time in his career, he wasn't the most popular. But let's think about Chuck Berry, and particularly that song. How many movies has the song Johnny been good in? I've heard in several, but one that comes to mind that we just did an episode on was Back to the Future. That's the part where Michael J. Fox gets out his guitar, struts across the stage. That's the song he's playing. I remember in the 90s, Judas Priest, the heavy metal band, British heavy metal band, they did a cover of Johnny B. Good, and it was quite different. But again, a heavy metal band is covering Chuck Berry. That's how iconic of a player he was.
Well, okay. Now, for a long time, people have always measured musical success by longevity.
Yeah.
Because longevity is what creates a musical artist becoming an icon.
Sure.
And the first example of that was Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin. Because even today, it's still in heavy airplay and rotations all over the place, even today. So that is a undeniable mark of success. But Johnny B. Good has. It's how many decades before, and yet even still today, Johnny B. Good has had the same kind of longevity, but even way longer.
Oh, sure.
Way to Heaven. So what does that tell you about the iconic of Chuck Berry?
Well, I'll tell you what it tells me, because it made me realize something, which is this, that by the time he performs on Saturday Night Live in 1977, he's at a point in his career where he's trying to have a comeback, and that kind of that performance helped launch the comeback. But it also did another thing. At that point, Chuck Berry's in his senior, he's a senior citizen. He's in his senior years, and he's still getting up on stage. He's still rocking and rolling, and so. Part of the reason people started to kind of forget about him, he's kind of from the rock and roll generation, the generation from before. But people really got to give Chuck Berry, he's an originator of the rock and roll sound, because, he kind of helped create the rock and roll sound. There was, if you all go all the way back, there were cats like Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Elvis Presley, Howlin' Wolf, all guys like this that really kind of created the blues. B.B. King, they were there at the forefront, the beginning of that rock and roll sound.
Yes, and all those people that you just mentioned were huge influences on Led Zeppelin.
Sure. And then that's why when he appears on a show like Saturday Night Live in 1977, the newer kind of younger generation at that time, all of a sudden they become aware of this rock and roll legendary performer they've never even heard of. And it's like anybody watching that performance is like, if they didn't know who Chuck Berry was, it's like, wow, who the hell is that? I gotta pick up that guy's records. I gotta go find out what he's all about.
Well, and now we're going like super long on Chuck Berry, but he deserves it. That much amount of time of this show. Okay, now do you have anything that sticks out to you?
Oh, sure. There's a couple.
As far as a performance.
Oh, sure. There's a number.
We'll kind of trade off. How's that?
Hey,
this is an organic show.
Sure. Go. You go next, Gar, and then because I got a whole list here. So you go. You tell me what.
Okay. Elvis Costello, Radio.
There you go.
And for me, the reason why I bring this up so early in the show is, it's kind of doing the research. I discovered performances by people that I never gave credit to.
Yeah.
And I never listened to, and it just was never on my radar.
Sure.
They were surprises.
Sure.
And Elvis Costello Radio stands out because I in all of my life, his music has never been my cup of tea.
I understand. Yeah.
And not saying that, I hate Elvis Costello.
No.
I'm just saying that he's just never really been my cup of tea.
Never been in your record collection.
But his performance, at that time on Saturday Night Live, and because what he did, which was extremely rebellious,
yes.
And a lot of people don't understand how rebellious it is, it's a move that can get you for many performances previous to that. For people that tried to do those kind of things, always ended up in them getting blackballed.
Yeah.
And people did it on the Ed Sullivan Show and got blackballed, and people have done it in other performances. And the thing is about almost every single time that people have done that and gotten blackballed, it raised their popular because of now the infamy. You see what I mean? So
it's almost like a badge of honor.
It's something that actually backfired because people that try to blackball you, it actually springboards the person, and now they become popular because of it. And radio is one of those. Because at that time TV had that same mentality. You do it our way.
You follow our rules. You're on it.
Do not deviate from that. We are putting you on TV. We call the shots. You have no say. And that is exactly what they've done to all of these artists that do these rebellious things. And Elvis Costello did it, and it springboarded him. And it pissed off the TV people, and they tried to blackball him, and it didn't work, and he became even more popular because he did it. And he just stopped the song that they told him they wanted him to do, and he did Radio, and I have to agree with him.
Yeah.
Radio is 10,000 times better than the song that they were forcing him to play.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when they had those Senate hearings and they had this long-haired heavy metal rocker like Dee Snider, they thought was a total imbecile, and he comes out, has his prepared speech and ends up sounding more educated than half the senators who were in the room. And again, that's just one example of when something like that backfires, and when they have these little controversies. And again, not necessarily that Saturday Night Live ever planned to have anything controversial. That's the very thing they were trying to prevent. That's the very reason. Like I was kind of thinking when I was doing the research for this episode that another thing you notice, they have a lot of popular artists and bands at the time. I'm kind of thinking to myself last night as I'm doing this. Okay, I remember, like in the early '90s, Guns N' Roses was a very popular band. Why the hell didn't they have them on? Well, I think because at that time,
they were a band that you can't control.
Axl Rose was very controversial. They could not count on that he wouldn't do something controversial, so they decide, okay, that band just won't appear on the show because there's too much of a likelihood they're gonna, do an F-bomb or something.
Well, and that is so true. When I performed back in 1999/2000 on a show called Your Big Break, it was exactly like that. TV has so much control over it, and they even take that approach. And of course, with you're somebody of my, kind of status, the last thing you're going to want to try to do is something rebellious. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because it's a totally different thing.
Sure.
For somebody like me. But they control virtually everything. They will, for the show that I was on, they would not allow the music part of it. Say like the people that play the musical instruments, they would not allow that to be live. So the choice that I had to perform on there was to do my performance with as a kind of karaoke, but with a really high level and high quality karaoke.
Okay, music. Wow.
That was the music behind my performance, and there were other people that were on the same show that I performed on too. That's exactly how they did it. But I took the choice. I took my band into the recording studio and we recorded the music and just pulled my vocals, and that was the backing tracks.
How cool!
And I sang to actually my band. And I didn't even have a bass player at that time, so I actually recorded the bass parts that were part of the music that was being heard by like millions of people on this show. So that kind of gives you a little bit of a snapshot of how much TV controls everything. I took the choice of us providing those backing tracks instead of them using it from like some other source.
That keeps it a little more authentic to me. And what I love about that, Gar, is it makes sense that you'd want to appear on the show. So you want it, rather than be controversial, try to, okay, we'll follow the rules, we'll follow the parameters that they're asked. But it's a great way to also, even if the band's not able to be up there on stage with you, it's a great way to still give your band the feeling like they're being included as well. Even if they can't be up there on stage, okay, that's actually you guys playing the instruments in the background.
Well, that did also open up for me being able to get the band to perform with me, even though they were not playing.
Yeah.
They were just acting like they were playing. But by then I had a bass player.
Wow.
And so we wound up doing, and I wound up having all of the rest of the guys on the stage. And that's what, by doing it that way, that's what that opened it up. It opened it up for the rest of the guys to actually be on the stage, acting like they're playing. Yeah,
and Gar, it's interesting because you see performances like what you're talking about with Elvis Costello, and I'm not a huge Elvis Costello fan myself, but it's interesting. Anytime you look up anything on Elvis Costello, this is one of the things you will read up on. Again, typically not a controversial artist, but it's one of the things that always comes up. And just to kind of finish the story I was reading, because of that performance, he was banned for about 10 years from performing on Saturday Night Live. Then they had him reappear like on an anniversary episode or something. They were going to have him come on. I think the original guest they had booked was the Sex Pistols, but then the Sex Pistols had some controversy and they didn't want to appear on the show, so they backed out. And they ended up getting also the Beastie Boys, and the Beastie Boys jumped on stage at this performance with Elvis Costello, and it was the Beastie Boys that kind of they kind of stopped playing what they were playing, and they they broke into radio and got up on stage with Elvis Costello, and I'm like, and that's kind of a historical. 10 years later, look back on what came before, and I like, what a cool moment in time, to be able to do that 10 years later.
Well, God, I love the Beastie Boys too, man. I mean, they were kind of a crossover, but they rocked.
Yeah, see, that's the thing about Saturday Night Live back in the day that I really liked. They included two of my most favorite elements: comedy. I love to go see a funny movie. I love to look at stuff that's going to make me laugh. That's my biggest problem. Some days people tell me, "What's wrong with you? You're always smiling." I tell them, "Well, you might want to try it," but so they included comedy and music, and it used to be a big thing in the day. You would watch a commercial for it, and it tell you who was going to be the host and who was going to be the musical guest, and they give you something to look forward to. It was always somebody big who's huge back in the day. Everybody would know who that artist was. Another interesting performance I came across was, I think I sent this to you too, a performance of David Bowie from 1999. Now, oddly enough, he was introduced, the host that night was Jerry Seinfeld, and as he's introducing David Bowie, getting ready to perform on stage, he goes up to Bowie and asks him, "Hey, you have a black wife, right?" And he says, and he's like, "Yeah, my mother's black too," and he's like, "Yeah, but you're a British guy, right?" And I'm like, okay, why is he bringing this up? And again, I mentioned this only because of how divided and political the world has become today. That is something Jerry Seinfeld will not even think of asking now,
Well,
Yeah.
Like I always say, different decades, it really gives you different snapshots of things that happen in different times and showing how social differences
sure.
change over time.
And mentioning David,
and then the same thing,
Yeah.
You go 10, 20, 30 years in the future, and they're going to take snapshots of the time period now, and they're going to use this time period as that same example. So,
and that's
it's just it's really more of an example of how social changes happen, and the only way to be able to really be able to notice it is by looking back in time and looking back at those snapshots.
And that's really what this is, Gar. That's a great way of putting it. This is a snapshot in time. One thing I enjoyed in prepping for this show today, going back and going on YouTube where I found all these performances we're talking about, it really was a snapshot in time. I mean, for one thing, okay, I'm kind of getting a flashback of that time, what the music landscape was, who were the big artists from that time, and interestingly enough, some of them are still out there performing, playing live, putting out new music. Some have retired, some have passed on, but it really was a snapshot in time, and that's what's interesting, because just from these these musical performances that are maybe at the most 7-8 minutes long, but it was really a fun snapshot, and David Bowie is another great example of all these artists we mentioned. Chuck Berry, Elvis Costello, they were all big artists from back in the day, and so and yet look at the diversity of those different artists we've mentioned so far.
There's another one that I actually I do remember seeing.
Uh-huh.
And the reason why this one was so special to me was because these two artists had actually broken up quite a while ago.
Yeah.
And then they just kind of got back together to do a surprise performance on Saturday Night Live, it just, by them doing that, it raised the anticipation of those two getting back together.
And who was that?
And it was Simon and Garfunkel.
Oh wow! Yes.
They they played. The songs, and they played and performed the songs that had made them so popular when they were together. And it really It did spark them getting back together, because when they did the performance on Saturday Night Live, all of a sudden the anticipation became screams from people for them to get back together. And so so what they would do is they would do like special tours. They didn't really get back together, but they did special performances at special places like New York City Park or Central Park in New York City, and things like that. And those they became. How do you sell out a park? Well, they did.
I mean, Gar, at that point,
does that tell you how many people showed up to that performance to see them just get back together and perform those songs? And this is, this really kind of gives you an idea about how special that performance was.
I mean, Gar Borras, that's why I do this show with you. I mean, I love the fact you brought that up for a couple of reasons. I mean, just think for a minute, if you were Saturday Night Live at the time, and that sparks these two, Simon and Garfunkel getting back together. They had a love-hate relationship. They hadn't played together in many years, but you're able to get them to patch up their differences enough, first of all, to perform together on your show, Saturday Night Live. And then the reaction from the performance on Saturday Night Live doesn't get them to necessarily say we're going to do a full-blown reunion, but we're going to do these one-off shows, and they're more than just one-off shows, because, like you're pointing out, they're shows in the Central Park and this, and they're selling out. And even if they'd only done 2 or 3 of those one-off shows, I mean, the reaction they got just from being on Saturday Night Live. And again, think of your Saturday Night Live. Wow, we got these two back together. I mean, that could be a tagline in the next commercial for Saturday Night Live. Watch Saturday Night Live tonight. Tonight's musical guest. Last time musical guest, we got Simon and Garfunkel back together as a result of appearing on. I mean, just think about that.
Well, but then also you have to understand that this actually happened when the show was just trying to start to get some legs under them.
Yeah.
So the show was not at its full-blown
potential
popularity at the time.
Yeah.
But these are magical moments that had everything to do with springboarding the popularity of those two, but also springboarding the popularity of the actual show itself. This was a witness and a snapshot of time of a show doing that organically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Sure.
It just happened because of the electricity of the audience, from the commercials that came on announcing that they were going to be on Saturday Night Live, and now all of a sudden the buzz that those commercials created, which created the ratings for the show to just spike. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this really gives you an idea. These are tangible data, that shows how the show became popular, and shows how that popularity happened organically.
Yeah, and another great performance that stood out to me. I think I sent this one to you too. They had a performance of Queen from 1982. Of course, it was the lineup, the very original lineup, of course, of Freddie, Brian, Roger, and John. And one thing is obvious this is when Freddie Mercury in 1982 is no longer got his beautiful long hair. He's cut his hair. He's got a mustache. Looks very different. But Queen remained a very popular band at the time. I mean, today in 2023, Queen is pretty much just Brian and Roger. John Deacon is retired from the business. Freddie, of course, has sadly passed on. But they're able to kind of go out there and do their thing still, because, let's be honest, who is not a Queen fan? Who cannot say that Queen was part of the soundtrack of their life,
I'm just so proud to be able to well, not proud. I'm so lucky.
Yeah.
That I was alive and enjoying music so much at the time period of the 1970s that when Queen came to the United States to perform,
yeah.
Tickets to go see them play were affordable to a high school age student.
Yeah.
That saved his lunch money
to go see
instead of eating lunch.
Wow.
I would sneak a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and then pocket the lunch money and then take that money and buy concert tickets. And that was the norm for high school students in say 1975.
Yeah.
And I stood in line, and I think it was either a Macy's or a May Company, and I actually bought the tickets to go see Queen.
Wow.
Play in concert, and I was blessed to be born at a time that I could actually do that and actually see the band perform. And even standing in line at May Company or Macy's or wherever, or J.C. Penney's, wherever that was, because that was the norm back then.
Yeah.
And the anticipation of standing in line to buy those tickets and talking to everyone else in the band that had that same high anticipation. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, sure.
This is the time period of 1975, when this kind of stuff was happening, and I actually got to see them perform live in concert.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of people that will say that, and it's not true.
Yeah, and Gar,
because
yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
It's like those people that are name droppers.
Yeah.
But, like all the people that say nowadays that they were out Woodstock, then, instead of, hundreds of thousands of people of being at Woodstock, there would have been millions of people, going to Woodstock. That's the kind of thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But I am so lucky that I actually got to see them. And the one thing that I walked away from seeing them at that time was how great of a lead singer Freddie Mercury was.
No doubt.
And I didn't know it until I saw them in concert that I was watching one of the greatest performers actually perform. I didn't realize it till I actually got to see that concert, how great of a lead singer he actually was, because I had never seen it before, but I was witnessing someone that had that entire crowd in the palm of his hand. And he knew it, and everybody else in the audience knew it, and they were all willingly being in the palm of his hand. And I witnessed that, and that is something.
Oh, sure. I mean, and
you don't get to witness every day.
And Freddie Mercury was much more than just a singer. He's a great performer, a frontman. He was so many things. A gifted songwriter. He could sing. He could play the piano. But yet amazingly enough, he tried to like some people do, try to go off and do a little solo thing. It was nowhere near the success of Queen, and it's very much like equivalent like a band like the Beatles. Those four guys together was just so magical that they could never have that with another group of guys. I mean, very much like the Beatles, they went off and all had solo careers, but nothing they did outside the Beatles was ever that. I mean, they were successful, but the thing they will always be remembered for is the Beatles. Very much like Freddie and Brian and Roger and John, they'll always be remembered for Queen, obviously.
Yes. You can tell how much I was looking forward to doing this show because I think my passion is really starting to come through.
So much, Gar, and it's so much, Gar, but Stutter hasn't come out yet. But let me tell you, another that's exactly what this was for me. Was looking back on all these great performances. It was kind of a flashback. It gave me a great snapshot of that time. And I got all this stuff off of YouTube. I'm going to be posting some of these performances we're talking on the Facebook page when we post this next week. But like very much with David Bowie and the Queen performances, I saw people commenting on the fact, oh my God, look how young they were, and yeah, it's a snapshot in time when they were. An interesting thing when you talk about guys like Freddie Mercury, Jim Morrison, even Kurt Cobain, because they all, Jimi Hendrix, they all died so tragically young. I mean, Freddie was a little older than some of those other. He was like in his mid 40s. I think he's about 45. But so anytime you see a photo, Freddie's been dead like 30 something years now. But anytime you see a photo of Freddie Mercury, he will forever be young because he was one of those guys who died tragically young. He died before he even had a gray hair. So anytime you see a photo, he is forever young.
Yeah, and it's I just don't know what to make of when I see people post on say like Facebook and stuff like that, the pictures of what someone from that time period would look like today, and you look at the picture
and you wonder,
and you do see some of it, but you know that it's not really 100% accurate as to how they actually would. But the bottom line, when you see somebody post something like that, it really confirms that I will always embrace the original, and just hold to my heart, this how everything became suspended in time. As to what we know and enjoy of that particular artist.
And it was funny, Gar. It's very much like you when we started doing this 3-part Saturday Night Live special. Until we started doing the episode, I never. I wasn't. It wasn't obvious, or I wasn't clear on this. I didn't really think of myself as a huge Saturday Night Live fan, but I'm finding out that especially from the classic era of the show, and looking back on some of these musical performances, I'm starting to realize it had more of an effect on me if I realized it had not initially. And that's kind of the first time we're doing one of these shows where that's kind of happened. It's kind of interesting.
Well, I think another part of doing this particular show is doing the background. Coming across performances by artists that I never gave the time of day, and I never really understood what they were about, and it was all because I just never allowed them to even be on my radar. And one of them was Billie Eilish.
Okay.
And I looked at how they were marketing it and everything, and I was always kind of like giving that dog that turns his head to the side, like, you know what I mean, and not really, okay, next, you know what I mean, because my initial reaction would be this doesn't get okay, let's move on, and that was always my reaction to Billie Eilish whenever she would cross my path, you know what I mean, in front of my eyes. Okay, next. And so when I was doing this background, I caught her a performance of Bad Guy, and I had never really heard it and everything. And I'm not saying this is my cup of tea, but what I am saying is now I do understand why people are embracing her is because every person that's a maverick.
Sure.
A part of being a maverick is you have to be willing to break down barriers. You have to be willing to test new waters.
Sure.
You have to be willing to get outside of the box. And how new genres are created, they're created by people that break down barriers. Now, some people attempt to break down the barrier, but the public reaction, doesn't really embrace it, and it really is not a successful endeavor. But then there are some people that do try to break down the barrier, and they are successful. And sometimes they break down the barrier, but they're only laying the groundwork for others to follow, and now you've got a road created.
Oh, sure.
And that's how new genres are created. And that's exactly what Billie Eilish did.
Yeah.
Is she created a new path where now people are willing to follow that path, and now she has created an audience that has fully embraced her. And the thing about it is now I get it. Her thing is not putting out the next top 10 hit. Her thing is the art, which is exactly what David Bowie was bringing to music when he broke away from Spiders of Mars. He was bringing the art. And that's exactly what Billie Eilish is. And just like when you go and you see a picture or art from some other artist, everybody has a different reaction, and everybody mentally digests it differently. But that is exactly what the artist is. That's the sole purpose of why the artist does what they do, is because they're creating everybody to have their own viewpoint of their art.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Billie Eilish did, and she created art. Now, is that my cup of tea? No.
No, but you know what?
Is that, no. But now I get it. And as an artist, now I understand how to appreciate it.
But you know what, Gar?
You see what I mean?
Yeah, you know what that says to me? Okay, Saturday Night Live accomplished something. In doing today's episode and doing the research, you come across Billie Eilish's performance from Saturday Night Live. And while she is not somebody who is in your record collection or my record collection, because you saw that performance, you have a new appreciation for what she does. And I dare ask, how many people have that same story? Had no idea. They've heard Billie Eilish, but they never heard a song. But they see that perform. Oh wow! Okay. Oh wow! Now I understand why everybody's talking about this Billie Eilish. Oh wow!
Well, that is what any musician that's trying to be successful in the business. That is what people are trying to achieve, and you have to understand that. When I was trying to come up the ranks, I would always witness what other people were doing.
Yeah.
And what other people were doing at that time was, this is popular. This is what we need to do.
Yeah.
So we can become popular.
Yeah.
Oh, now this becomes popular. This is what we need
Let's
to
jump
do.
on the bandwagon. Yeah.
Let's jump on the bandwagon. And what the people that had a better chance at success, the people that had a better chance of success understood that the record companies were not looking for another Journey or another Nirvana or another Judas Priest or another. You see what I mean? The record companies are not looking for another Def Leppard. You see what I'm saying? The record companies are looking for the next big thing.
That's why.
That's what Billie Eilish was doing. You know, in an outside of the box way, is she was creating a next big thing that became like her thing that just stands on its own. It's very different from the norm, and it's very outside of the box, but it created a legion now that is a huge fan base for her.
Oh, sure. And you know, Gar, before we wrap up today's episode, I want to bring up a couple other killer performances I came across. You know, Bon Jovi actually appeared on the show about 3 different times, you know, throughout the history of Saturday Night Live. And so that's another thing. If you are a popular enough band and you performed on the show once and, you know, you got a great reaction, there's a pretty good chance you'd get invited back. And like I said, Bon Jovi's a great proof of that. They performed on the show from what I could find 3 different times. I mean, that's what I came across. Bon Jovi performs the song Always on Saturday Night Live in 1995. Now, that's an interesting time in the band's career. That's when they released that album. The song Always was a big single. They released the album, I think it was Keep the Faith. And the big news around that album, of course, was, oh my God, Bon Jovi cut his hair. It's short. And so the time they perform the song Always, that was a big charting song. So that's part of the reason they chose to perform that song. Okay, that's a big hit that's our big hit from the day. And Bon Jovi's kind of a mainstream band. They're not quite heavy metal. They're kind of closer to hard rock, and there's some elements of pop there. So Bon Jovi's one of those bands that you don't have to necessarily be a diehard fan to be able to name a Bon Jovi song. You know what I mean? So they're a pretty safe bet to have them go on a show like Saturday Night Live.
Well, you know, I'm really glad you brought that up, because when you sent me that email, and you gave me that episode of John Bovey,
Oh
my God, that was so funny. And to anyone that checks out this,
I'm gonna post it on the Facebook page for people to see, Gar. But
oh my God, I didn't know that existed. It was priceless. Oh my God, and it really hit home for me because I'm in a tribute band.
Yeah.
And it pokes fun
at tribute bands.
Best way at tribute bands. Oh my God.
And you know why? Yeah. See, I included it in there, Gar, because it had the same reaction. Why? And again, it's combining my 2 favorite things, music and comedy. And many times they would have like somebody like a John Bon Jovi go on there. Like I said, they appeared more on than once, but I found a lot of these little comedy skits. And like John was in a couple of the little comedy skits. And it's a funny thing to see one of your favorite rockers do kind of his attempt at being a stand-up comedian. And for him, he's one of those guys that has kind of mass appeal. So it seemed to work for him. And I love the fact that they would have a musician come on and kind of take part in doing a comedic skit, you know?
Well, you know, it was Jason Sudeikis too.
Yeah.
Like really early in his career at Saturday Night Live, and you know, what was the other guy that?
Yeah.
and that. Just coming up with that idea to do that and everything, and their whole idea was to do everything the opposite. And sang the songs, and you know, I highly recommend to anyone. You have to YouTube that. It is absolutely priceless, and it is, and to be in a tribute band, you have to be able to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
If you can't laugh at yourself, then you're taking things too seriously.
Yeah. And Gar, did you see the other one I sent you? They called it. Remember that show Behind the Music used to be on VH1, like a documentary. They talked about all these bands where they suffered from drug addiction. The band was popular and they blow up and they break up and all this. They had one called Behind the Music Rock and Roll Heaven, where they kind of looking back on that show. Yeah.
At the time when I was doing it, I ran out of time.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
And I wound up missing that. But, the show, this what we're kind of touching on with what we're doing here is we're really pointing out how a TV show, had such an impact on musical artists, but in the same way, a ton of those musical artists had a huge impact on the show, and it's this combination of those two things is what had everything to do with why the show exploded in popularity. They worked in concert with each other to create this nuclear bomb of a TV show.
Oh, sure. I mean, even like you talk about somebody like Bon Jovi going on there and performing their latest charting hit song just by appearing on Saturday Night Live that particular weekend. Like I said, people that maybe never heard of Bon Jovi before, oh, that's great stuff. All of a sudden, those people go out and buy the record. It becomes an even bigger hit just based on somebody seeing the band for the first time on that Saturday Night Live episode. Yep.
And just like I was talking earlier, I did the same thing with Jack White. I never gave him the time of day. I didn't really know anything about his music, and anytime I only caught like snippets, and oh man, that's weird. And just I never got it, and I always kept doing next every time. And I saw two performances. One he did with White Stripes, and the other one he did as a solo performer on Saturday Night Live. And for the same reason that I was saying about Billie Eilish.
Sure.
Is it my cup of tea? No. But I finally got it. Why? Is he did the exact same thing. He was trying to create a new thing.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That stands on its own, and you know what I mean? It's just nothing like anything else.
Yeah.
And that's how genres are created, and he did the same thing with what he's doing. Now, and now he has legions of people that appreciate what he's doing. And for the same thing I'm saying, is it my cup of tea?
No. But yeah.
But what I'm saying is,
you have an appreciation.
I get it now.
Yeah.
I get it. And now, and you really have to appreciate these people that are doing that, because in a way they are attempting to try to save music.
Sure.
Because that has always been the thing that creates, keeps the torch going.
Yeah.
And these trailblazers that are trying to do that are actually trying to keep live music alive.
There you go. Yeah.
And so maybe it's not my cup of tea, but you really have to embrace what they're trying to do, because it's everything to do with the lifeblood of how music actually continues on and on and on. And if we don't embrace these people like that are outside of the box, that are trying to create these new avenues, then we are part of the contribution of music dying.
Yeah. I mean, and just to kind of wrap this up for today, Gar, two more performances I think I have to really mention here. First of all, I also noticed Aerosmith appeared on the show 3 different times, and just to kind of give you a snapshot of what they did, on one episode they performed "Crying" and "Sweet Emotion." They also did a performance of their hit song "Janie's Got a Gun," and Aerosmith also was included in a Wayne's World type of comedy bit, which with Joe Perry and Steven Tyler, I think, and it was with the two guys that do Wayne's World, and it was kind of a fun little thing, and so they definitely, in fact, they got to go back 3 different times. I think that kind of says something about who Aerosmith is and who isn't in Aerosmith. The one that really surprised me that they would even invite on, not because I'm not an AC/DC fan, but AC/DC is just a band I would never picture Saturday Night Live inviting on, but oddly enough, they performed 2 songs. They performed "Stiff Upper Lip." That was a title track for one of their album in the 90s, and then they did a song everybody knows, "Shook Me All Night Long." But they killed it. They owned it, and I'm glad that they got to go on, because again, it's one of those snapshots in time for a band like AC/DC to say, kind of who's at the end of their career. Wow, we performed on Saturday Night Live. That's like one of those caveats.
Well, it's a badge of honor for anyone to have something like that on your resume.
Yeah. I mean, you think of all these bands that can say something like that, or hey, we appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Yes, and what do we consider legendary performances on TV?
Yeah.
Which are 2 of the measuring sticks that for many decades have been used as that measuring stick? People that performed on the Ed Sullivan Show,
The Tonight Show,
people that performed on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
Those 2 have, I don't see that ever being eclipsed, but I don't mind being wrong. But those are the 2 measuring sticks, and undeniably, who else can you say are being used as that same kind of reference?
Only one other kind of show comes to mind, and I'd have to say The Tonight Show. But that's just.
Or you can also say American Bandstand.
There you go. It's
like it doesn't happen, but
when it does,
it is a rare and small group.
Sure. And Gar, to really wrap this up today, what I think you really, like a lot of times, you really encompass this in a word. This was a snapshot. We were able to capture part of the majority of a Saturday Night Live story. I think we told great in these 3 episodes, but I think we really touched the surface. I think this is something we are going to revisit, maybe down the line, because like even talking about the breakout stars, the comedians that appeared on the show, we just barely touched the surface. There's so many other great comedians that got their start there. So I really do think this is something we're going to have to revisit. And just to let people know before we say goodbye, next time when we do this, Gar, I know you are really looking forward to this, and we're going to be doing an episode on one of my favorite Don Knotts movies, The Incredible Mr. Limpet.
When I was a kid, that was a really special moment for me.
Yeah.
And whatever references, okay. We'll
save it for next time.
We want to jump into it now.
Well, Gar, you rock on, and you have a great rest of your week, and take care, my friend.
Oh, dear brother. Bye-bye.
Chaotic Riffs Magazine.